then turn it over to Meryl, who will take it away from here.
Okay. And I'm delighted to be able to introduce Ellen Levy, who is obsessed. Writing has taken over her life. She spends part of every day living in 1910s with her characters, Deborah and Miriam, young Jewish women in love. They are products of the turn of the century values in a relationship unacceptable in post-Victorian America. Passion pulls them together, yet the world is not ready for them. Ellen has published 4 books in her series of historical fiction stories, following Deborah and Miriam through 10 years of their lives, 1910 to 1920. And I must say that her research is impeccable. She brings in the history of the time as part of her stories, and then she footnotes that or puts a little addendum so that you get the actual history of what happened that she is then relating to her story and her characters who are living through them. Her most recent book, Victory, Virus, Votes, 1917 to 1920, is an Amazon bestseller. She lives in Florida with 500 older women who celebrate the hard-earned freedom to be themselves. So go on, Ellen, dear. Are you frozen? It's you.
I think she's gone out. She'll come back.
She'll come back. Yeah, we all have to be patient because it's weather related. It's a disease that gets into the computer when the weather is hot and humid anywhere in the world. So there it is. You're
If
back.
you could all mute yourself, if you're not on the screen speaking, that would be helpful.
So the first thing I want to say is that my internet is very unstable and I got thrown off about 10 times last night. So I apologize if that happens. Just be patient, wait a minute, and I'll come back. I promise you I'll come back. So welcome to Historical Fiction Makes History Come Alive. I'm Ellen Levy, the author of 4 books of historical fiction taking place from 1910 to 1920 in Massachusetts. I write about a Jewish lesbian couple who met at the turn of the last century, and very little has been written about women loving women at this time. The most significant aspects of my book is not the history, but that my characters are compelling and their story will interest you. Okay. Today I'm going to show you both the challenges and the joys of writing historical fiction. I'll share some short readings from my books, teach you a little bit about historical fiction, plus I'll read you a short erotic section at the end. How's that as an incentive to stay until I'm done? Historical fiction, the literary style in which real history is interwoven with imagined actions, is exciting to write and to read. The characters may be real people from history or characters created in my imagination. But because I was not there, any actions that they take are fictional. I can take liberties to create personalities or events that probably didn't happen, though I need to place all action in accurate time and space. Historical fiction is the closest to time travel that I'll ever achieve. Historical fiction is set in the past. It's an opportunity to bring the past to life in a way that history books cannot achieve. I may choose to base my character on authentic events or real people, yet everything else is made up. The melding of history and fiction allows the reader to imagine a time in my eyes. For instance, Eleanor Lee Parton may not have played softball, but I might add elements such as those to make my books and the history I'm telling about feel real. Writing historical fiction requires a great deal of research into the time in which the book is set. Often I read several books, done internet research, watched films, listened to podcasts, to create a few pages or as little as a few lines about a specific event or person. Become a relative expert on odd topics such as treatment options for broken femur in 1915, or how hospital trains assisted victims in World War II, World War One. 19 chapters.
You're going away again, Ellen.
Ellen,
Okay,
this
you're
is
back.
okay. Ellen,
I'm back.
if you would turn off your own picture, then you would stay on longer. We could
Okay.
hear you.
I will do that. Okay, it's going to leave again. Hold on. I'm going to try. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We
Okay.
didn't, when you had the 2 slides before that, we didn't hear
Okay,
anything.
well, I'll keep going. So
I can't hear.
you didn't. Okay. I need to go back. Okay. Okay, let me try to share again, see if that will work. Can you see?
Yes,
Okay.
good.
So I'll go back to this one and hope that you can read it, that you can hear it. I've become a relative expert on odd topics such as treatment options for a broken femur in 1915 and how hospital trains assisted victims in World War I. Also, the use of the word lesbian in the 1910s. My characters celebrate every Jewish holiday, and Miriam, a practicing Jew, never writes on Sabbath. Even though I doubt any of you would ever look up the dates that Miriam's writing in her journal, they're never on a Friday night or Saturday because I need to be accurate. The language in the book is appropriate to the times. I've researched the etymology of many, many words, sometimes finding that my characters said a word that was not in use yet. And I cheat a bit. I use footnotes to add some background information about real events, and you'll hear that. One area I work on tirelessly is to provide photographs to help the readers enter the world of the 1910s. Whenever possible, I take my own photographs of the buildings, which look similar to how they looked in 1910. So this is Stonegate. The first book in my series is Romance at Stonegate, and this is the actual building of Stonegate. When I find others' pictures, my primary goal is that they are accurate. So when you see a photograph in which I depict the USS Celtic at sea in a storm, the photograph you see is of the USS Celtic at sea in a storm. And my photographs of the Hello Girls, the switchboard operators hired by the U.S. Army Signal Corps providing wartime communication in France, are actual photographs of these brave women. Although historical fiction dates back to ancient times, it first became a literary genre in the early 1800s, beginning with Sir Walter Scott's Ivanhoe in 1819. Mary Shelley, in addition to writing Frankenstein, also dabbled in historical fiction. The Last of the Mohegans, War and Peace, The Odyssey, The English Patient, and Gone with the Wind also fit this classification. What personally intrigued me was Diana Gabaldon's Outlander series. Maybe you've read her books or streamed the TV series. And maybe you'll be the next writer or reader to become hooked on this fascinating genre. My goal when writing historical fiction is to immerse you, the reader, in the era of the 1910s, you the similarities and differences of life in Boston 100 years ago. This picture is of Boston in the
Your sound's gone again, Ellen.
I'm so sorry, but that's what's happening. It's the weather. Okay, can you see that okay?
Not yet.
You can't see it.
You can see your name and stuff, but that's all.
Then
There
I'll
it is.
stop it and try again.
No, we had it.
Oh, okay, I'll share it
Yeah.
again. Okay. There, now you can see it?
Not yet, but wait a minute.
Okay, I'll be patient.
There it is.
I'm so sorry. I hope you're all patient. I'm
There it
okay,
is.
good. I
You
provide
got it.
many details. Oh, good. I hope that the historical information will add to your understanding of issues that are common in both time periods. In my books, some of the dual issues are coming out as lesbians, caring for children and adults with special needs, the importance of women's votes, and sadly, living through a pandemic. Deborah and Miriam, my central characters, met and fell in love in 1910, and my books follow their unconventional lives as a lesbian couple in post-Victorian Boston. They feared discrimination from their family and their temple, knowing
We can't hear you.
We can see, but we can't hear.
I'm back. Did you get to hear anything about Deborah and Miriam?
A little.
You stopped with the temple, getting thrown
Okay.
out of the temple.
Well, this is Deborah and okay. So they feared discrimination from their family and their temple, knowing there was no tolerance in religious Jewish families for what was considered deviant behavior. They were isolated and lonely, not being able to tell anyone of their relationship while struggling to find others like themselves. But this loving couple persisted and conquered challenges. So now it's time to read you about my wonderful characters, and hopefully you'll be like my other readers who come to love them like friends. So first, I'm going to set the stage by sharing where Deborah and Miriam's romance began. You'll meet Ruth's friend from a Jewish summer camp. Ruth is quite beautiful, but very self-centered. Now sit back and enter the 1910s along with me. I plan to entertain you with interesting stories, fascinate you with bits of history which are probably not in your history classes, and entice you with a romance you may envy. And this first reading is from Romance at a Stonegate, the first book in the series. It's from Thursday, July 7th, 1910, and it takes place in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. Ruth told Miriam that she wanted to have the first party of the season, using Miriam's visit as an excuse. Miriam's only request was that the party be on Sunday because sundown, the end of the Sabbath, was not until after 8:30 on Saturday night. Miriam would be unable to attend a party during Shabbos. This Shabbos would be the first in her life when Miriam would not be in temple. On Sunday, the night of the party, Ruth was fashioned.
We can't hear you, Ellen.
The last thing we heard was on Sunday night, the party.
Okay. Tell me when we're all back. Oh, those of you who were so patiently staying on, I appreciate it. I'm sorry. Nothing I can do about it.
We're back.
Okay,
You're
good.
back.
On Sunday, the night of the party, Ruth was fashionable in her Empire-style scarlet silk dress with a low-cut lace bodice. The dress had a huge, deep scarlet bow under her breasts with a matching sash atop the overskirt. A lace panel peeked through a slit in the front of her long gown. Everyone who arrived was perfectly dressed in fashions suitable for a New York party. Ruth forgot to introduce Miriam to several of the girls who arrived, distracted when they made a fuss about Ruth's dress. No one commented on Miriam's attire. Miriam was aware of how Ruth was different than she was at camp. She was flirting with all the young men, something Miriam never expected because Ruth spoke scornfully of boys during their late-night talks at camp. Miriam was awkward with unfamiliar people, yet her anxiety lessened when Ruth's new neighbor, Deborah Levine, arrived. Deborah, a inquisitive eye, wore a tailored white blouse and a simple beige linen skirt, a less fashionable ensemble than those worn by others at the party.
No, gone again. I'm back.
We'll keep going. I apologize. Nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
Okay, Deborah was quite awkward during her introduction to Miriam. Deborah's skin prickled and her face became noticeably flushed. Deborah was a little tongue-tied, but Deborah's ungainliness put Miriam at ease. Instead of fussing over Ruth, Deborah turned to Miriam and asked her to show her where the cold drinks were being served. Miriam led Deborah to the dining room where they found they could speak together without interruption. While sipping lemonade, Deborah and Miriam conversed calmly and quietly, avoiding the bustling activity in the parlor. Deborah was memorized by Miriam's outstanding beauty. Miriam's soft, wavy dark hair, sweet face, lithe body, and deep bright eyes entranced her. Unlike Ruth, Miriam was reserved. Her soft blue dress trimmed in white eyelet lace made Miriam appear sweet. Deborah thought, she certainly looks like the girl of my dreams. Miriam noticed she was at ease for the first time since arriving in the Berkshires, partially because Deborah appeared more serene than the others. Initially, Miriam was happy to answer Deborah's many questions. Miriam answered each query, and Deborah always had another question ready. Suddenly, Miriam ran out of things to say. Without any warning, she excused herself and joined chattering young girls dressed in their finery on the back porch. She left so suddenly, Deborah wondered if she had said something to offend her. She followed a few minutes later and found Miriam standing slightly behind Ruth and her circle of friends. Miriam seemed a little uncomfortable. Deborah stood in the corner gazing at Miriam, but trying not to be too obvious. After a few minutes, Deborah noticed one of the boys enter the porch and head directly to Miriam. He stood quite close to her and tried to engage her in conversation. The boy reached out to touch Miriam's arm, and her automatic reaction was to withdraw from him. Deborah thought, "That's just as I would do." He tried again, and again Miriam pulled her arm away. When he did this a third time, Deborah could not tolerate watching this behavior. "Stop being disrespectful," Deborah called out as she approached them and pulled his arm off Miriam. "Leave her alone." Deborah immediately realized this was none of her business. Miriam had not asked for assistance, yet Deborah could not stand to watch him make such a sweet girl uncomfortable. Luckily, no one else heard this interaction. Deborah did not know if Miriam was pleased or annoyed with the rescue. Deborah was angry with herself for intervening. Deborah went into the other room to sulk. This attractive girl had captured her attention, and Deborah had just behaved badly. She thought, "I have a bad habit of acting impulsively when my sensibilities are rattled." A moment later, when Miriam approached, Deborah averted her eyes and walked away. By now, she was fairly certain Miriam was aggravated. Deborah recognized her interest in Miriam as similar to how she once felt about a girl in her school, and it did not end well. Deborah bid Ruth goodbye and walked out the door. Miriam was confused by Deborah's sudden departure. She found Deborah's somewhat forceful interruption a relief from the boy's unwanted advances. Miriam admired Deborah's assuredness and wished that she possessed Deborah's confidence. Miriam was disappointed, wanting to thank Deborah for helping with the boy. She also hoped to get better acquainted with her. So what were the historical facts I needed to get right for this section? The time for sundown, the time to welcome the Sabbath on July 7th, 1910, was at 8:32 p.m. Ruth's dress was based on a picture of a fashionable dress from 1910, which I showed you. Deborah's outfit was very basic, everyday ensemble of 1910. I had to search hard to find the right outfit for Miriam, sweet and feminine. The porch where Miriam stood was on the actual house next to Stonegate, Deborah's family home. Lemonade was popular, though lemons were difficult to grow in Massachusetts and were most likely imported from Logie's greenhouses, a nursery in Danielston, Connecticut, about 2 hours from Great Barrington, which produced Ponderosa lemons as early as 1900s. So you can see how much research goes into things. Historical fiction places you in history as it's happening. I'm going to share some stories, one of cookies, one of a game, and one of the construction of the Empire State Building. Try to forget that you're living in 2025 and imagine that you were there during each discovery. And this first section is from Born Lesbian, Deborah's memoir, the 5th yet unpublished book in the Deborah and Miriam Boston Marriage series. In this section, you'll be introduced to a famous restaurant south of Boston. You would have enjoyed being with Deborah when this section was happening. You will meet Fanny, a young girl who was a neighbor of Deborah's and is significant in all my books. You'll also be introduced to Helen and Susan, Deborah and Miriam's friends, housemates, and employees. Here's the section. 1938. Fanny came home one day with a wonderful story. It all began when Ruth Wakefield and her husband bought a home south of Boston, which had originally been a toll house. She was an excellent cook, so she started the restaurant in her little house in 1930. She started with only 6 tables, but her food was so delicious the business kept growing. "Do you want to go to the restaurant?" Helen asked, wondering if this is why Fanny brought up the story. "No. Well, yes, I might like to go, but let me tell you the rest of the story." They called it the Toll House Restaurant, and the owner wrote a cookbook with her favorite recipes. Everyone was especially glad to get her recipe for her famous chocolate crunch cookies. "I can make them for you," Susan said, guessing this was Fanny's motivation to tell the story. Oh, you're all so impatient. Just listen and I'll tell you the rest of the story. Sorry. The Nestle company had somehow heard about our cookies and they offered to print the recipe on their candy bars. Mrs. Wakefield had to promise she'd only use.
I know I gotta read her books. That much I know.
Makes me want a
Waiting for
cookie
all your
right
pictures
now.
to show up. Oh, it will. Soon as all pictures are back, I am assuming I can go ahead. Mrs. Wakefield had to promise she'd only use their chocolate if they printed her recipe. The company realized that it would be easier for cooks if they made small chips of the chocolate so no one would need to chop up their cookies bars to put in the cookies. So this is how both the chocolate chip and the chocolate chip cookie were invented. I applauded and told Fanny that this was a story I would remember. Chocolate chip cookies became a staple in my home, earning them a separate cookie jar right next to the one with Bubby's Mun cookies. I would only buy Nestle chocolate chips to make the cookies, which I'm certain would have pleased Mrs. Wakefield and the Nestle company. So, for your information, the 1918 building purchased by Ruth Wakefield and her husband in Whitman, Massachusetts, never actually collected tolls. The actual toll house, which was not the picture you saw, but it is this one, was built on a main road which was intended to collect tolls, and it was across the street from the house the Wakefields bought. And the name was just a marketing strategy for their restaurant. So I wasn't there in 1938 with Deborah, but my grandmother took my family to the Toll House restaurant for my birthday every year. I don't remember the cookies, except when they were warm out of my mother's oven. The next story is a bit of a mystery. When you figure out which game was invented in 1936, stay quiet, or you can raise your hand. Don't call it out and spoil it for others. You will meet Mildred, a minor character in the addendum of the first book, whose life has more significance as the books go on. And here's the next story. 1936. One of Mildred's children requested that I buy her the most popular game of the year for Hanukkah. I found it interesting that in this time of dire poverty and financial ruin during the Depression, a game of acquiring wealth would be all the rage. The children begged me to join them, and I immediately noticed the similarity to a game which I played often when I was younger called the Landlord's Game. I decided to research the origins of this game, which I remembered being created by a woman whose picture and name was on the box. I found a lovely young librarian to help me research this game's history. Luckily, she became intrigued and did a great deal of investigation between my first and second trips to the Boston Public Library. The Landlord's Game was indeed invented by a woman, Levy, a feminist and follower of the economist George Henry. She wished to teach his anti-capitalist ideas through the game, showing the economic value of property ownership and natural resources. She wished to teach a way for disadvantaged tenants to work their way out of poverty and to learn that a single tax on land could create a productive society. She patented the game in 1904, yet it quickly became a folk game, paid by people who made their own boards and rules. The game spread widely, reaching Atlantic City, a very popular vacation destination, when a teacher moved there in 1920 and popularized it in her Quaker community. Her version of the game, now known as, and I assume you all know, Monopoly, represented Atlantic City. Baltic and Mediterranean avenues were in a segregated black section of town with the lowest rents. Oriental and Vermont Avenues were an area of modest rooming houses patronized mostly by lower middle class Jews. The yellow and green sections on the board were the more established, wealthier parts of town, and the highest rent district of Atlantic City was Boardwalk, where wealthy citizens showed off their riches by having black men transport them in wheeled chairs down the boardwalk. This game represented the wealth class, race and class issues of the city. The librarian answered my questions about its relevancy during the Great Depression, noting that in this game, everyone starts out the same, collects the same, and everyone has equal opportunity to become wealthy. Race, class, and gender were irrelevant, and common people can acquire wealth. And here's the footnote. Most board games were produced in New England in the 1920s and 30s. George Parker, those are the Parker brothers shown here, George Parker of Parker Brothers of Salem, Massachusetts, published Monopoly in 1935, paying Lizzie Maggie the meager sum of $500 when he discovered that she was the original inventor of this game. Parker Brothers, a monopoly, bought Monopoly. Okay, didn't lose you that time. The man who claimed to have invented it modeled the game charms he found on his daughter's charm bracelet. The next story takes place in 1931, when the tallest building in the world was being constructed. I'm going to show you a video, let's hope it works, so that you can imagine what it was like to watch the Empire State Building rise above all other buildings. And think about my challenge about how to place this monumental feat into my story. As with all historical fiction, the characters are the most important, with the story second in importance, and history just the background. Finding a way to make the history significant to my characters is the greatest challenge of writing in this genre. And we'll see if the video will work. No, it's not going to work. Well, there was a video there. Sorry you can't see it. It's not working today. And now I'll read you about the Empire State Building. Despite this being a time of economic turmoil, a huge skyscraper was constructed in New York City. I read much about its construction in the newspaper. On May 1st, President Hoover pushed a button to light up the Empire State Building, the tallest building in the world. It loomed 102 stories into the sky over Manhattan, on the spot on Fifth Avenue where the famous Waldorf Astoria Hotel had previously stood. I was pleased to learn that the construction provided countless jobs to countless Americans, and impressed to read statements from city dwellers who viewed the new skyline with awe. At the insistence of my 14-year-old daughter, Ida, we traveled to the city to see the building. My sister Anna was thrilled to join us, though our parents, who were approaching 70 years of age, felt too old to stand in long lines to see something they could view on a photograph. No amount of persuasion worked, though later they were sorry they'd let their creaky bodies limit them. As we approached the building, we, along with most others walking on nearby streets, had our necks strained upward. It seemed impossible that a building could soar so high. My insides lurched a bit as I imagined heading up those so many stories. With exquisite murals, a long line of people anxious to view the city telescope on the observation. Okay, I paid 10 cents for each of us, hopeful that it would be worth this expense. When it was finally our turn to be crammed into one of the 64 Otis elevator lifts, I was excited, though a bit apprehensive. For almost a full minute, we stood silently watching the small display click off floor by floor. The sensation was unnerving. My stomach seemed to stay on the first floor. I still remember the remarkable scene in front of me as I exited the elevator. We walked around the observation room, mouths open and our heads spinning scene to scene. Everything seemed different and unreal. It seemed unfamiliar except for the recognizable sights of Times Square and the vast expanse of Central Park. We were each allotted a few minutes of viewing through the telescope as excited people in line pushed ahead if we stood too long. I had difficulty focusing and did not recognize a single building. When we returned home, Ida found a newspaper clipping describing Helen Keller's description of the building. Despite being blind and deaf, this amazing woman described the construction as representing the human spirit triumphing over challenges to reach an extraordinary goal. I noted that the same could be said of her. And here's the footnote. The Empire State Building first building to exceed over. In the first 6 months, the Art Deco building collected dollars and dimes and nickels, exceeded expectations by being constructed in record time, a mere 13 months. Al Smith, the governor of New York, collaborated with the chief financial officer of DuPont and General Motors to spearhead the construction, earning Al Smith an office in the building. And that's Al Smith, you see. A famous photograph of construction workers on a beam high in the air showed that there were no safety measures in place at that time. It's amazing that only 5 of the 3,000 construction workers died on this project. And I have one more story to read you before you get to hear the sex scene. The OLOC Art and Writing Share group insisted that I add this because they thought you'd appreciate learning about the Canary Girls. This is a great example of historical fiction where I needed to meld facts with my character story. You'll get an example of Deborah's impatient manner and Miriam's gentle way of calming her. We could all use a Miriam in our lives. In the story, I mentioned Dennison House of Boston, where Miriam volunteers. This was the second settlement house in this country and was founded by 3 lesbian couples who were professors at Wellesley College. And here's the section. 1915. Miriam came home from her volunteer work at Dennison House with deep lines etched on her forehead. Deborah, I need to talk with you. Do you have a few minutes? I'll stop what I'm doing. You look anxious. I am. I really need to talk about what I learned today. Have a seat. As soon as they sat down, Miriam began. I have a new child to tutor who needs a bit of help learning to read. She's a sweet and pretty girl who arrived recently from England, so language was not a problem. She was a delight to work with, but I was shocked when her mother arrived to pick her up. Her mother is yellow. What do you mean yellow? Did she have on a yellow dress? No, her skin is yellow and her hair is yellow. Not blonde, just yellow. Deborah appeared concerned as she asked, do you think she's sick? No. Well, yes, she had a bad cough, but I don't think any illness would cause this. I've never seen anything like it. I didn't dare ask her, and I tried not to stare, but it was extremely noticeable. I would have asked. I'm certain you would have, but I just talked with her about her daughter, and once she relaxed, she told me the whole story. Well, don't keep me in suspense. Let's sit over a cup of tea and I'll tell you everything. Please don't make me wait too long. Miriam began as she boiled the water. She worked in a munitions factory to do her part in the war effort while her husband was fighting in the Great War. Unfortunately, soon after she began her job, he was killed. Does that have something to do with her turning yellow? The munitions factory made her yellow. She chose to work in the danger zone so she could earn a higher salary. She and the other girls packed a yellow explosive substance into the shells, to which a fuse was added later. And that substance made her yellow? Yes, seems that she and the other girls were careful. Okay, we're back. And that substance made her yellow? Yes, it seems that she and the other girls were extremely careful with the powder, but it landed on everything. Her face and hair, the tables, the doorknobs, the floor, and everything else. They made her leave all her clothing outside the area they worked, but all the girls turned yellow. And what was most frightening was when she took the blanket off her brand new baby. He was a bright yellow. That must have been shocking. It was. She told me that the color on her will fade over time, and in just a few weeks, the baby should be back to normal. And I bet everyone stares at her. She's probably afraid of hiding the baby in a blanket so no one would see it. I was glad she felt safe enough to show me. Please find out more about her the next time you see her. I promise. After Miriam's next shift at Dennison House, she had more details. The baby's color was already fading when I saw the canary mom today. Canary mom, it's not nice to call her names. That's what they call the girls she worked with, the canary girls. And their babies are canary babies. I didn't make that up. What else did you learn? Her story is really sad. Thousands of women were hired in munitions factories doing jobs that men had done before going off to war. The munitionettes, as they were called, were paid best if they worked in the danger zone. They risked their lives daily, and sadly, several women died when they pushed too hard on the powder and explosive detonated. To protect the girls, they had very strict orders to wear no metal and no silk because these things could set off explosives. Anyone caught with their wedding rings or other disallowed items were immediately fired. They were also instructed to drink large quantities of milk to offset the chemicals. Why would women take on these jobs if they were at such risk? Deborah asked. Why do men do such dangerous tasks? Probably for the money and to do their part in the war effort. Well, this woman was caught with a hairpin which she had forgotten to remove and was sacked immediately. And soon after she sent home, she realized she was pregnant. She didn't even get to tell her husband that they were expecting another child when he was killed. What a terrible situation. How did she get to the States? She received a dependent's pension after his death and used the money to purchase steerage tickets for herself and her daughter aboard the steamship heading to the United States. Food wasn't included in the $30 ticket price, so after they ate up all the food she had brought, she was forced to spend 60 cents a day for meals, which she shared with her daughter. This used up the pension money, yet she was relieved to learn that the settlement houses took in poor immigrants. That's how she ended up at Dennison House. It is indeed a very sad story. And when you get my next book, you'll get to read more about the Canary Girls. And I hope this section will whet your appetite to learn more about these women.